Hello, and welcome to another episode of Solipsist Watched. I'm your host, the Social Solipsist, and this week I watched 1985's Enemy Mine. Boy, this this movie has accomplished a feat. I'll say that much. I went into this movie skeptical, and I came out disappointed. Which is especially galling for people who know me, because I tend to be, skeptical going into many things. But especially an 80s sci-fi movie that is not heralded later, those tend to age pretty poorly. And yet this one somehow turned out worse. I'll just be upfront about that. I don't remember this. This movie came up in something or other very recently, like in the past week, and now I cannot for the life of me remember what it was or track down the source of the reference. It's just in my head somewhere, so I ended up watching it, and oh boy, where do you even start with this film? It's an absolute mess. The 80s were an era of anyone and everyone trying to cash in on the both Star Wars and Star Trek sci-fi media cachet. And most of them did it very poorly, but usually you at least got something like unintentional out of it. And this is not entirely without merit, but I can't fathom, even though it is fairly, its notoriety is fairly limited, it is still a name that is recognizable enough that lots of people seem to remember it and don't have terrible things to say about it. And let me be upfront, despite my negative outlook on it, it's not offensive. It's not truly awful in any particular way, but it tries to do many things and stumbles at the first step of most of them. There are some aspects that do stand out as being particularly well done, but they're few and far between, and they are at jarring intervals. This is directed by, well, it wasn't originally directed by this person, but it's directed by Wolfgang Petersen. Wolfgang Petersen, who directed Das Boot, generally heralded as one of the greatest war films of all time. But I don't know how he got this gig. Evidently, this film is adapted from a novella, and the original adaptation was going so poorly that the director was fired and pretty much everything that had been done on it was scrapped. But they kept the two lead actors, those being Dennis Quaid, who I don't think is a particularly good actor. The other being Louis Gossett Jr., who evidently, I had never heard of him before, evidently has had a long and storied career with, in just a cursory lookup, many dozens, if not hundreds, of credits to his name in not insubstantial roles. Somehow this is the only time I've ever stumbled into anything he was in, but nonetheless, he probably puts on one of the better performances in this otherwise pretty lackluster film. Oh, there's so many things wrong with this thing. Where do we even start? Uh there's not much plot to spoil, but I'm still gonna try and keep out of that area. Um the the pacing alone is just just like rubbing my eyes right now, trying to stimulate my brain to process what I watched. Come on. Uh, the everything is wrong with this. Um, the pacing is a disaster. The tone is a disaster. The visuals are all over the place. Um, the story has no arc. The characters are bordering on non-existent. The intention is unclear, and yet it is trying to do everything at the same time. It has no focus, and it suffers dramatically for it. This movie is Planet of the Apes meets Dances with Wolves meets Star Wars meets Battlefield Earth. And for anyone who's had the misfortune of watching Battlefield Earth before, I'm pretty unequivocal in my feeling that I would rather rewatch Battlefield Earth than this film. Again, it is not that this film is without merit, and Battlefield Earth is truly awful and is like without question bizarre and bizarrely Scientology propaganda, but it is still more entertaining than this film. So, what happens in this film? I I kind of don't know, because the narrative arc uh, takes these random ups and downs, and the pacing. I mean, the the film is I think an hour and 40 some odd minutes long, an hour and 48 minutes long, and it feels like 3 hours. And yet it seems to never relent. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. It is at a breakneck pace, and then suddenly it will come to a screeching halt for what it thinks is a tender moment, but is completely unearned. And it's not even that you're holding back laughter, because it's not that good and it's not that bad. It's it's the nervous laughter of, this is so absurd and my brain doesn't know what it's looking at. So I'm just going to have an outburst of noise to try and like ground myself back in reality. This film is bizarre. And simultaneously, while it seems to want to do everything, many of its facets seem entirely willing to not go anywhere and not aspire to anything. I'm trying not to. It's kind of meaningless, but I'm trying not to spoil some things. Although I would not recommend really anyone watch this unless you just literally have nothing better to do. Um, I cannot tell you. I mean, Dennis Quaid's character is arguably the main character, but he has no character of his own. He wavers dramatically, scene to scene, and even shot to shot in what his attitudes are. There's a bizarre narration over random chunks of the film, not even consistently over it. And that to me is always a hallmark of a film that like fell apart in the edit and they said, "Oh God, we got to stitch this together. Um, get the lead actor in here to do a voiceover for a for a half day, and that'll let us, that'll be the sutures to hold this corpse together. But he is without character. He's also acted by Dennis Quaid, so it's a bit of a mess. His motivations are nonsense, non-existent, and his characterization is so inconsistent that any attempt to relate to him or his interests, wants, needs, motivations, whatever, are to look for those things as an act of madness. The few standout things are mostly in the sets and the costuming and the props. There are some pretty good puppets and animatronics, and some very alien looking sets and things that are shot decently well. Overall, the film is not shot in a particularly awful way. It's just sort of looking at weird shit, and I don't know, it's never going to look great. But even the things that it does right in those areas are pushed to a level where they end up falling apart because they reuse the same puppets slash animatronics multiple times. And you're going, oh, I've already seen that. Did you guys forget to cut this bit? And it's arguably for plot reasons as an explanation, but no, they had it and they didn't want to put it in just one scene, so they put it in two. And it is absolutely riddled with plot holes, and they are self-inflicted. I'm not even going to get into the ones that are just latent in the plot, in the script full of holes. Excuse me. I'm sorry about that. It's just, I want to know why. I want to know why this happened, and I want to know why people remember this fondly. It doesn't even have like any standout scenes where you can go, that was so silly and absurd that I can recommend this to people on the pure basis of like so bad it's good type of recommendation, because it doesn't even get there. Beginning to end, every 30 minutes, it's a different movie. I've only sort of come to that conclusion just now, that it's literally like every 20 to 30 minutes, the movie's just like, we're done with this movie. Let's start a new one. And tries to stitch it all together in a way that's completely incomprehensible. It's just, boy, it's a lot. It's a lot to take in. Like I said, Louis Gossett Jr. does a pretty good job. And the outfit he's wearing, the prosthetics and all that, and all the makeup look quite good. But also they're bad to look at. They're difficult. Like, listen, I'm not like obviously the opposite of this is the weird argument of like, oh, aliens in sci-fi or whatever non-human creatures need to look pretty all the time. But no, this is like the drastic opposite end where it's just, ew, you're kind of hard to look at. And I'm not sure why they made the choices they did. Clearly, a lot of craftsmanship went into making this outfit, but ooh, yikes. And it gets worse. I won't get into all the details, but there there are some prosthetics and puppets that I am sure are going to haunt my dreams, with how horrific and hard to look at they are, and not in a like, oh, that's too gory or like literally gross kind of way. More of a, oh no, you thought you were making one thing, but I find what you made horrifying. Yikes. It also comes to just, I mean, unsurprisingly for an unfocused plot and story and script, it comes to a completely bizarre, sudden, and weirdly upbeat conclusion, that seems almost antithetical to, I can't even say the rest of the film, because that seems to imply more of a synthesis of all the other components that is not apparent. But no, it equally does not fit, but is also tainted by the like sort of upbeat sci-fi third act 80s taint, that was sort of prevalent at the time. And all I could think about, I mean, like I mentioned the other movies that it was related, that I sort of mentally related it to before. There were a whole bunch more, and all of which did each of their components better. One other that I'm just going to use this as my opportunity to talk about this film, because I don't think I've talked about it on this show, but I may have talked about it in a random video years ago, is it reminded me a little bit of a film I like quite a lot called Hunter Prey, which is a very low budget indie sci-fi feature length movie, that nobody will ever watch. I don't even know where you can get it. It is extremely small and unheard of, but I like it. And it does everything better, and it has a focus. And yeah, I mean, that's just, the more I watched, the more I was thinking about other films and how this film was butchering every aspect that they did right. It's it's melting my brain to think about this film any more than I already have. Uh, I have a like sort of vindictive urge in my heart to like try and dig through like every piece of media I've consumed in the last week to find out who mentioned this and uh, tell them they're wrong. Not that I think it was even that the context was even somebody recommending it, just somebody mentioned it, and no. Listen, if you have literally nothing else to do, or somebody's got a gun to your head and says you have to pick between a whole bunch of bad movies, you might be able to do worse than this one. But whereas I knew it had a pretty mixed review history going into it, and thought that maybe that had been skewed downwards, I now feel like it's been skewed upwards. It's a pretty miserable watch, and has some specific stuff as well that it just sort of rubbed me the wrong way. It's every portion of it is a mess, and I think I'm just going to end up repeating that over and over again at this point. So I'm going to cut myself off before I just become a broken record player. Thank you guys for watching another episode of Solipsist Watched. If you've had the misfortune of watching this film, or have ever, or by some misfortune have decided to not watch this video, watch the film first, and then come back and watch the video, I'm sorry. Put your thoughts in here, or if you've ever heard anyone talk about it before. because clearly it's well enough known in some circles to be regarded, not well regarded, but regarded. So help me, help me understand what I just watched, because it's real bad. Thank you guys for watching. I've been the Social Solipsist. I'll see you guys next time.